You're listening to the Small Business Accelerator podcast, accelerating success, one founder at a time.
With your hosts, Roger Bryant and Sarah Wilson.
We support small business owners, the little guys. We're here to help you win in today's landscape.
Join us each week as we reveal powerful strategies for small business owners that save you time and money.
Because we believe every small business owner should have access to Fortune 500 style strategies without breaking the bank.
Subscribe now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to accelerate your small business success. Okay, so ever feel like you're drowning in to-do lists and still chasing your tail, like you're working all the time but not really getting anywhere?
Yeah.
We're diving into that whole work smarter, not harder idea, but with twist.
Yeah, we're going deep, not just skimming the surface here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've got some really interesting stuff to dig into today. We're looking at a guide called Double Your Income, Halve Your Hours, which, let's be honest, who wouldn't want that?
Right. It sounds like a dream.
Totally. And we've also got this online course that's all about competing with giants through automation. So we'll be unpacking all that good stuff too.
And we'll look at how to actually use this stuff, like how to figure out what your most valuable tasks are, how to optimize your time better, and even like how your workspace can actually be messing with your focus.
Oh, I feel personally attacked by that last one. That email tab is a siren song. You know what I mean?
Precisely.
Yeah.
So let's address the kind of the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Like the modern workplace. It often feels like this crazy, chaotic whirlwind.
Oh, 100%.
But this guide we're diving into, it suggests we actually can regain control instead of just like surrendering to the chaos.
Right. It's not about like magically finding more hours in the day, right?
Yeah.
It's about making the hours we do have work for us.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of working strategically comes into play. The guide talks about this classic principle. You might know it as the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle.
Okay, love a good rule. Break it down for me.
So basically, it's the idea that roughly 80% of your results, they come from just 20% of your efforts.
Okay.
So the key is, if you can identify and really focus on that crucial 20%.
Those needle-moving tasks, as the guide calls them.
Exactly. You unlock this whole new level of efficiency and impact. Imagine finally having the time to focus on those big picture, strategic things that often get pushed aside.
Okay, but how do we actually find those magic 20% tasks? Because, let's be real, my to-do list is basically a monster under my bed at this point.
Well, this is where the guide's take on lean principles comes in. Picture your workday, like imagine it as a factory production line.
Okay, I'm picturing conveyor belts and those cool robot arms.
Exactly. Now think, how can we eliminate unnecessary steps or bottlenecks in your production line?
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right. Things like maybe unnecessary meetings, redundant emails, or tasks that don't really directly contribute to your goals.
Ouch. Yeah, I can see a few areas for improvement already.
Right. So by streamlining your workflow, you free up time and mental energy.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And that's where this Automations Made Easy course comes in with a pretty intriguing promise.
Oh, yes. It claims you can save at least 2 hours every single day through automation.
2 hours. That's huge. Think about it.
That's life-changing, potentially.
It is. Imagine what you could accomplish with those extra 2 hours, right?
Right.
And this ties in really well with what the guide was saying about creating that distraction-free workspace.
So we're not just talking about, like, freeing up time on our calendars. We're talking about protecting our mental energy, too, right?
Exactly. And the guide makes this really, I think, important point about how these distractions, they actually like fragment our focus. They make us less effective overall.
Yeah, it's like trying to write a report with one hand while answering emails with the other and scrolling through social media with your toes. It's like multitasking our way to mediocrity.
That's a great way to put it. And it's so true by, taking those repetitive tasks and kind of like handing them off to automation.
Yeah.
It creates that space for the kind of deep focused work that actually like moves the needle.
And that's where I think the Automations Made Easy course really gets interesting, right? It actually gets into the weeds on automating those things like email responses, data entry, even social media posts.
Yeah, all that stuff that, let's be honest, it can really suck the life out of your workday. But imagine like having systems in place so these things kind of just like handle themselves.
Okay, now I'm picturing myself sipping a tropical drink on a beach somewhere while my inbox magically sorts itself out.
Right. Maybe not quite that idyllic, but you get the idea. And then the beauty of that is it frees you up to actually focus on those high-impact tasks, like those vital 20% we were talking about.
Okay, so let's say we've decluttered, we've got our little automation buddy set up. Where do we even begin to focus? Where do we start?
So The guide and the course really emphasize this idea of setting clear goals. The guide actually gives a shout out to this tool called ClickUp Goals.
ClickUp goals. What's that all about?
So it's basically a project management platform, and it's built around this idea of setting SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Oh, right, right. SMART goals. I've heard of those. But how does using a tool like that differ from, like, just jotting down goals in my notebook, which, let's be honest, sometimes ends up on the floor,
Yeah.
and you know the deal.
It's taking it from intention to action. That's what this type of tool does well. It gives you that framework to actually break those big goals down into smaller, more manageable steps. And then you can actually track your progress. You can set deadlines. You can even collaborate with other people, which is really helpful.
Ah, so it's like having a little accountability buddy, but digital.
Exactly. And this ties into another thing that both the guide and the course highlight, which is prioritization.
Which, let's be real, can sometimes feel like a whole other job in itself.
Right.
Like, how do we even decide what absolutely has to be done, like right now, versus what can maybe wait until tomorrow or next week?
Well, think back to the Pareto principle we were talking about, right? That whole 80-20 magic.
Okay, yeah.
Use that as your guiding principle. Focus on the tasks that are really going to give you the biggest return on your time investment.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those days when you're just, slammed? Like, how do we avoid burnout when it really feels like there's just not enough time to do everything?
So the guide actually had this surprisingly simple suggestion for this. Strategic breaks.
Oh, wait, hold on. Are you serious? Taking breaks makes you more productive.
I know, right? It sounds counterintuitive, but tons of studies actually show this is true. Our brains, they just aren't designed to operate at peak capacity for hours on end.
So we're not machines after all.
Yeah.
Turns out even our brains need like a little coffee break, every now and then.
Precisely. And it's true. Just like a car can't run on empty, neither can we, right? And the guide really stressed this whole idea of having a healthy lifestyle even outside of work.
Right. It's all connected, like getting enough sleep, eating decent food, maybe fitting in some exercise, all those things that we tend to sacrifice when we're like, oh, deadline, deadline, deadline.
It's so true. But the thing is, when we neglect all that, our well-being, it's like we're actually sabotaging our productivity in the long run.
Yeah, you can only run on fumes for so long.
Exactly. It's about, playing the long game here, creating a sustainable way of working, not just sprinting towards burnout.
Which honestly makes those strategic breaks sound even more appealing. But, okay, let's be real. Sometimes life just throws curveballs our way, right?
Yeah.
What about those times when you're just totally slammed with work? How do we deal with that?
Well, the guide actually gets into this. It talks about the very real dangers of overwork and burnout.
Yeah, for sure.
And it actually gives some pretty practical strategies for breaking free from that cycle of always feeling like you have to work long hours.
Okay, what? Because sometimes it really does feel like saying no is just not an option,
You're right. It can be tough. But one thing they emphasize is delegation.
Okay, yeah.
Learning to share the load a bit. Not only does that help you, but it also empowers other people on your team, and it frees you up for those more big picture strategic tasks.
Right.
The other thing is setting boundaries, which I know can be hard.
Oh, boundaries. With work, how do you even start to do that?
I know, right? It can feel kind of awkward at first, but it's really about learning to say no. If someone's asking you to do something that you just, you don't have the bandwidth for, it's going to cut into your personal time, learning to politely but firmly push back is so important.
It's about taking control, right? Instead of letting our inboxes rule our lives.
Exactly.
Which I imagine is probably extra challenging if you're trying to implement these kinds of ideas in a bigger company where maybe things are a little more traditional. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And the guide actually addresses this. It talks about the potential for resistance to change.
Because change can be scary.
It can.
Yeah.
Especially if people are used to doing things a certain way.
Right. They've got their routines, their systems.
Exactly. But they really stressed open communication as the key to getting past that. It's about framing those changes, not as threats, but as hey, this is going to make everyone's work life better.
Okay. So communication is key. But even if you have buy-in from your coworkers and stuff, there's still this this ever-present enemy of focus, which is distractions.
Oh, those pesky distractions. And the guide actually calls out the biggest culprit of all our smartphones.
Oh, it's true. It's like the irony, right? We
Yeah.
have we have a world of information at our fingertips, but
Yeah.
sometimes we can barely string together a coherent thought.
It's a constant battle.
It is.
Both the guide and the course, though, they talked about like creating that distraction-free workspace that we mentioned earlier.
Right. Silencing notifications, putting your
Mhm.
phone on D&D, maybe trying something like the Pomodoro technique where you're really focusing on blocks of time.
Yeah, all good strategies. It's about being intentional with our time and attention.
It really is. Which kind of brings us to that, ever elusive idea of, work-life balance.
Which often feels more like a myth than an actual thing you can achieve, right?
Right, exactly.
But it doesn't have to be. And the guide actually reminded us that like work-life balance, it's not about this rigid separation of your work life and your personal life.
Right.
It's about creating a rhythm that lets you show up fully for both.
It's about finding that sweet spot where, your work is actually energizing you. It's not depleting you.
Exactly. And that's where the whole idea of this Automations Made Easy course comes in. If you can reclaim hours in your day,
Right.
imagine having that extra time to do things you love, spend time with people you care about, or just do nothing.
Right. That's important too.
Absolutely.
So it's not about becoming productivity robots. It's about designing a work life that actually supports,
Yeah.
life.
I love that. It's about like aligning your actions with your priorities in all areas of your life.
Yes. So instead of just being busy, you can be intentional, you can be productive, and you know what? Maybe even a little bit joyful.
Now, wouldn't that be a welcome change? Remember, working smarter, it's not about doing less. It's about achieving more of what really matters to you.
And on that note, we want to hear from you. What resonated most with you today? What's one thing you can start doing today to ditch the overwhelm and start working smarter, not harder? Let us know. Thanks for tuning in to the Small Business Accelerator podcast.
We really hope today's strategies help you grow your business without breaking the bank.
Don't forget to check the show notes for links to resources we've handpicked for small business success.
If you found value in today's episode, it would make our day if you subscribed to the podcast and left us a review.
You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And stay tuned for our next episode. Next time, we'll reveal yet another game-changing strategy that's revolutionizing how small businesses on a shoestring budget take on giant corporations and accelerate their success.
Until then, keep accelerating your success.
This is Sarah Wilson.
And Roger Bryant, signing off.